Hello and welcome. My name is Ben Gauthier, and I am the Events and Engagement Manager here at the University of Arizona Global Campus. I'm the host of this session, Teaching and Learning, 4 Steps for Thoughtful Problem Solving. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you'd like to use it, click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now I'm pleased to introduce you to Cindy Terebush, a professional development facilitator and keynote speaker known nationwide for her expertise in early childhood education. Cindy authored the book Teach the Whole Preschooler, Strategies for Nurturing Developing Minds, and co-hosts the podcast How Preschool Teachers Do It. She has been an associate faculty member at UAGC for 6 years and provides subject matter expert services for the learning and development team at the Institute for Families at Rutgers School of Social Work. Cindy.
Thank you very much. I am going to welcome you all. Thank you all for being so patient. Promise we can still finish on time. I am a frequent professional development provider, and so I have had frequent snafus in my career, and we're going to be just fine. So we're here today to talk about this topic of teaching problem solving. And I can tell you that when I was young, there was not a lot of intentional teaching of problem solving. So I want to assure you that what we're learning today does apply to young children. That's my field, early education and parenting and raising young children. But it also applies to adults, and so many of us did not learn this. I want to see if that's true for you or not. So what I'd like to do is I would like to get you logged into, and I'm going to take the risk and get you logged in to another software. You only need your internet browser to use it. You can use the browser on the device that you are on this Zoom on right now, or if you are at a desktop or laptop computer and you have another device nearby, like for example, a phone or a tablet, you can grab that because you're going to log in to the software using your internet browser. And there are several ways to log in. The software is called AHA Slides. It allows you to answer questions anonymously and in real time, and we're going to create something kind of cool with it during this session. In the meantime, here's the 3 ways that you can get logged in. If you're going to use the browser and the device that you're looking at Zoom on right now, you can click on the link that I just put in Zoom's chat. It will open your browser and it will take you where the questions will be when I'm ready to put them there. If you have a device with a camera, you can also use the QR code that I am about to show you on the shared screen. You would hold your camera up to the QR code that's coming up. It will name your browser or the AHA Slides site, and you can click on that, and it'll open your browser and take you where the questions will be when I'm ready to put them there. Or you can go open up your browser and type in the web address for this session yourself, which is on Zoom shared screen right now. It is ahaslides.com/4 and the word solve, for solve, because that's what we're here for. And I can see that people are getting logged in on their browsers. When you are in the right place in your browser, you see the QR code and you see a bunch of emojis. So you can go ahead and tap on those emojis, and that tells me if we are connected, if we are in fact connected, and we are. Because as you tap on them, I can see them floating toward the top of the screen. We are going to start this session about teaching and learning, 4 steps for thoughtful problem solving, with 2 of these AHA slides. And I'm going to go ahead and put the first question in your browser. It is a poll, and it says, which statement is closest to your personal experience? Is it, when I was young, adults tended to solve my problems? Or when I was young, I was intentionally taught how to solve my problems? And after you enter your response, come and look at Zoom and you'll see the bar chart. This is a timed slide. And I see it looks like almost everyone has answered already. And we have about 25 seconds left on the timer for anyone who hasn't, though I can see the percentages just like you can on Zoom shared screen. And it looks like the vast majority of the people who are currently attending this session say, when I was young, adults tended to solve my problems. And that's something that we need to teach children and, frankly, maybe other adults in your life how to do. So for this group, the majority of people tended to have adults solve problems. I want to ask you another question, these aha slides. I want to play a little word association game. And I'm going to put that in your browser. Let me put the QR code up again for anybody who needs it. Here's the word association. When I say problem, the first word you think of is, and we're going to create a word cloud. The more people who put in the same word, the larger the word will become. So let's see how this word cloud forms. Remember, the larger words were put in by more than one person. This is also a timed slide. And I see people are still typing. I can see that on my end. You have a little over a minute to contribute your words. Ben said in the chat, Ben said, it's hard to remember that long ago. Same, Ben, same. Okay. People are still typing. I do see that the largest words so far are solution, challenge, help. There's other also really great words on here like solve, options, stress, trouble. Those words that kind of describe our stress around the fact that we may have problems that need to be solved. And for the vast majority of us in this session, people did not teach us how to do that when we were young. You know, the early childhood years, they're foundational. And what we learn in those years, hopefully, is repeated often enough to stay with us. What we don't learn in those years is much harder to learn as we get older. Because in the early childhood years, the windows of the brain that are described by Dr. Pam Schiller are wide open to this sort of learning. And then as we get older, that window narrows, narrows, narrows until it gets much harder. You know, think about, it's not only true for problem solving, think about learning languages. So much easier when you're young, so much more difficult as you get older because those windows start to close. All of the things that you've put in this slide do relate to having problems, and I want to recognize something about problems. First, I think it's valuable to say out loud that we all have them at every age. There's usually a difference between the problems that children have and the problems that adults have, but that doesn't make the process of solving them different. So if you look at this slide, you're going to see that children's problems are often social emotional events. For example, what we're looking at on the image on this slide are a couple of children who are playing with blocks. When children are in a block area, for example, and they may be struggling over who gets to use a particular item. What you're looking at on the slide is a common occurrence, whether it's blocks or any other material. Children may also be trying to get into a group, not knowing how to do that in an appropriate and safe way. They may need attention and not know how to get attention in positive ways, especially in a group when they're in an early childhood setting, having to sort of compete for attention with all of the other children in the room. For a child, problems are a puzzle that seem to have no solution at all. That is not so different from some adult problems, but adult problems, as it says on the slide, are often related to work, finances, and life changes. On the slide, we see adults at a table discussing ideas. The notion that everyone at that table is going to agree is often not realistic. And so it's important to keep in mind that whether we are children or we are adults, problem solving has specific steps that many people in our generations didn't learn as children and therefore have trouble not only managing our own problems, but teaching to other people. And so we're going to go through those steps together today. What are the 4 steps that everyone needs to use to solve problems? And I'm going to share a load of resources with you so that you can take this back to work you may do with children. You can adapt it for anyone you may work with who is older than the early childhood years because it's valuable to everybody. So remember, what we're talking about today applies to children, applies to you, applies to me, applies to everyone. Step one is identifying the problem, which can be the hardest step, especially for young children. For young children, their feelings are so big and they have such strong reactions in their bodies to their emotions that they struggle to think. There are actually MRIs that show that when stress hormones and chemicals like cortisol, for example, are coursing through our bloodstreams, that the thinking centers of our brains shut down. In young children, and in fact, in anyone under their late 20s, the thinking centers of the brain aren't even fully developed. The executive level thinking that it takes to solve problems occurs in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, right behind your forehead. That governs executive function and three major areas that impact our thinking and our abilities to kind of reason through problems. One of those things is inhibitory control, which is just a fancy way of saying the ability to control your impulses. So in people under their late 20s or early 30s, they do not have fully developed inhibitory control. They also don't have fully developed working memory. So just because they understood how to solve something in the past doesn't mean that they remember how they did it and therefore know what to do now. It also controls something called mental flexibility, which in the simplest explanation is that ability to take something that you learned with one set of people in one situation and in one way and apply it to different situations. So the ability to identify the problem is especially challenging if that area of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is not fully developed. It is still challenging as an adult because even though that working memory may be more developed for us, as an adult, I can tell you I sometimes have trouble retrieving things from my memory, from the long-term memory and the pathway that it goes on. So when we ask children about their problem, all they know is they're having this huge reaction to an emotion. And they will say something like, when I say, "What is the problem?" they will say, "I am mad." And one of the things that we've struggled with in our generations is that for generations, some of us may have been told that feelings are not facts. The people would say to us things like, "That's a feeling, not a fact. Tell me what happened." And if that sounds familiar to you, you're welcome to put that in the chat and say, "Yes, I remember the notion that feelings are not facts." But I'm going to propose to you that they actually are facts. Feelings are the facts of the moment. They are the truth of this moment. And they are what's happening. They are a chemical reaction in the human body that children and adults experience when they are under stress. Feelings should not be pushed away, pushed aside, or ignored. So the first step when people cannot think clearly is to calm the body so that they can think and identify the problem. Whenever we are under stress, we basically have the same bodily reaction as human beings. We begin to breathe shallow, and that increases the heart rate. When the heart rate gets to a certain level, the brain understands that you could be in danger, and so it tells the body to release adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, and other stress hormones through your bloodstream. So what we need to do first is acknowledge the feeling and help people to manage those feelings. So on the slide that's coming up are a couple of ways that we acknowledge feelings, a couple of examples. One of the examples says, "You threw the toy. I think you are angry." We have to say what we see first and then attach the feeling to it. "You pushed your classmate," it says on the slide. "It looks like you are frustrated." For an adult, I think we've all seen upset adults. I have a son, my younger son, who reacts very strongly to his emotions. It's part of his inborn temperament. To this day, he can react strongly if he's not careful. I can still look at my son and use this way of speaking and say to him something like, "You slammed the door. It looks like you're very upset. It looks like you're very frustrated." So say what you see and then talk about that emotion. Then we need to help people calm their emotions down. And we do that by stopping that bodily process in its tracks if we can. And that's through deep breathing. So many of us have learned over the years that breathing is so important, that deep breathing. So when you think about that bodily process of the first thing that happens is we all breathe shallow when we're under stress. If we do deep breathing, it prevents the heart rate from getting too fast and sending that message to the brain that there's an emergency. It prevents those chemicals from coursing through our bloodstreams, and the thinking centers of our brain can stay on. So that deep breathing. It's very important to co-regulate if you're working with children or people, adults who seem like they need that support. So we don't just look at people and say, breathe deeply. We co-regulate. We say something like, you pushed that person. It looks like you are very frustrated. Breathe with me. And we deep breathe with them. It's really valuable to teach children and adults, frankly, the value of deep breathing when no one is upset. When nobody is upset, they can learn what a deep breath is so they understand what you're saying when you say, let's take deep breaths. In the chat, Ben said, we have my 5-year-old daughter take dragon breaths. I've seen people do this so many ways. I've seen the dragon breaths. I've seen the whole blow out the candle thing. Yes, Vivian, adults should do that too. If someone does something that's upsetting to you or you have a problem, we need to sit and take deep breaths. It's also very valuable to engage the senses. The top of a table is always cooler than the air around it. So if you even wanted to right now, if you're sitting at a desk or a table, put your hands on that and you'll see it's a little cooler than the air around it. If we can get people to put their hand on the top of a table, it will snap them into the moment. Because once the senses are engaged, the brain now is occupied with that and starts to calm down. So step 1 was identify the problem. Once we say, you threw the toy, I think you are angry, then we may need to say, what made you feel that way? And so we have to think about what are some problems that children typically have that cause big emotions. Typically, they are struggling over things like taking turns, getting their place in line, waiting for something, wanting something that they cannot have in the moment because delayed gratification is learned over time. So they may be struggling over something like that. There's a wonderful quote that's going to come up on your slide after we look at the things that we just said. We're going to help the person calm their body. We're going to talk about what caused their emotions, and we're going to remember what Steve Jobs just said that's on your screen. We're going to define the problem correctly, because if we can help people define the problem correctly, said Steve Jobs, you almost have the solution. Which brings us to the next step. We have to think of some solutions. The next step is thinking. So once we've engaged the brain again, we think of solutions. And we have to help people come up with 2 possible solutions that are appropriate, relevant, and good with us if we are the adults in a room full of children. Those solutions have to be okay. They have to be appropriate, relevant, and something that can possibly take place. Children, especially, should be given a choice of 2 possible solutions if they are too young to think of them on their own. And we can say things like, next time that happens, you can do this or that. And I'll tell you that there are times when I've been talking to my husband and said to him, next time that happens, maybe we should do this or we should do that. When children are under 3 years old, one of my solutions is always come get me. So even as an adult, think about it. When somebody says to you, call me, text me, I will help you, there's something so comforting and doable about that. So one of the solutions can always be, you can reach out to me, you can come get me, you can text me, you can call me, depending on the age of the person. But 2 solutions is best. Human beings have trouble choosing from more than 2 things. If you've ever gone to buy a new phone and they put out 5 colors in front of you, you know what I'm talking about. So we might say something like, when you are angry, you can say, I want that block, or you can ask me for help, like it says on the slide. Step 3 is something that children don't think about, sometimes angry and upset adults don't think about, We really need to think about safety. So we have to think about our own safety and the safety of everyone around us. Step 1, remember, was identify the problem. Step 2, think of some solutions. Step 3, think about your own safety and the safety of everyone around you. And remember that safety is not only physical safety. Yes, that needs to be part of the conversation. Safety also includes psychological safety, which includes feeling supported and comfortable and willing to take reasonable risks. Children need to consider the feelings of others, and they don't without our guidance. They're not there yet. We have to help them understand that other people have feelings too, and those feelings can be different from our own. So my son, who I mentioned earlier, he is currently 28 years old, college graduate, working very successfully in his field, engaged to be married. And just the other day, we were having a conversation about something I was deciding about my life, and he had an opinion about it. And I had to remind him that he can have different feelings than mine. We can feel differently about it. Sometimes adults need that reminder too, and especially children, because they can't take perspective yet. Children are experimenting with perspective in our dramatic play areas in early education. That pretend play is how children figure out how other people must feel. So they come into our early childhood programs and they pretend to be their families because they think it must be so awesome to be as powerful and wise and wonderful as my family. Hopefully that's what they're thinking. Then they go home and they pretend to be teachers because they're thinking it must be so awesome, powerful, and wonderful to be as wise and smart and kind and caring as my teacher. But the only way for them to figure that out is for them to embody it. They are becoming a symbol of the things they're trying to figure out, and that symbolism lays the road for later reading comprehension. We need to let them do that in our dramatic play area. To sit with them to solve a problem, though, to think about the safety, both physical and emotional, of other people, they can't do that without us. We have to help guide them and think about that. And in the chat, I see that Ben put, my daughter needs autonomy, and giving options is incredibly effective. Giving options to any human being is incredibly effective because it helps us to feel empowered and like we have some influence over our environment. And people need to think to know that. If you doubt that, just think back to March of 2020 when we felt like we had no power over our environment because everything was shutting down. It was a very off-putting feeling for most people. And that's how children feel when they don't feel like they have power over their environment. So I'm going to give you two choices. I'm going to talk to you about the safety and well-being of the other people, and we're going to think about that. And the questions are that we need to think about are, will everyone be okay if I try this solution? And then step 4, something again that children don't know unless we teach it to them. Step 4, try the solution. If it doesn't work, we can try another solution. This is something that young children don't know, and adults may still struggle to grasp in the middle of a big problem. When adults have huge problems like financial problems, for example, they may feel there's no way, if this doesn't work, I'm sunk. Folks, there's always more than one way to approach a problem. Children, when they're looking at a problem, they don't know there's another thing they can do. It's why when they're building a huge block structure and it falls down, they just cry. They don't understand that we can try to rebuild another way. So when one thing doesn't work, we have to teach them. All is not lost. A lack of understanding of this is why children have a lot of trouble regulating their way through the entire 4 steps of problem solving. And they need a lot of our support to do it. So before I ask about if you have any questions, I want to share with you some resources that I have put on a virtual bulletin board called a Padlet. So a Padlet is a wonderful virtual bulletin board. I'm going to show it to you first and all the resources that are on here. And then I will give you the link and the QR code for this Padlet. So if you've never seen one, this is a Padlet. I like to share resources on a Padlet because we can put many different types of resources under one link. I will give you one week link to access all of this. And you can see it's divided by columns. To see everything on a Padlet, you need to scroll every column. And horizontally, this Padlet goes past the window, so you can also scroll horizontally. And I'm just going to go through and show you some of these resources and how this works. What I'm talking about today comes from the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And a link to their website and resources is right here. What you're looking at now are thumbnail images. When you click on them, things will happen. So when I click on that, it's going to take us to challengingbehavior.org, where the resources live from the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And the Wi-Fi is slow, so it's not showing me right away. We'll get back to that. I'll show you maybe another website. But the website will open up and take you there. I also have some resources that you can use with children in both English and Spanish, maybe adults too, who knows. I'm going to show you this We Can Be Problem Solvers book. This is a PDF. There's a printer symbol on top of this preview right here where I'm circling. And there's 3 dots in a menu. You will have the download attachment command here. And it says We Can Be Problem Solvers. Have you ever had a problem? This helps us to normalize problems for young children. Everybody has problems. They're not alone. Everybody does. Problems can sometimes make us feel sad, mad, frustrated, or confused, and we can talk about these emotions with them using this book. If I have a problem, I can do something. I can try out some solutions to help me with my problem. And then it walks them through the 4 steps of problem solving in a child-friendly way. There you go. Thinking of the solutions. They give samples of solutions here, but I have better images of that for you. And then how would everybody feel? Would everybody be safe? And then give it a try, and if it doesn't work, I may have to think of other solutions. Then it's an activity. Let's try to be a problem solver. Here's the problem solving steps that can be displayed for children, because children really thrive from visuals. What solutions might work? And we are learning to be problem solvers. And some of these visuals right here I love. These are problems that children typically have in an early childhood program. So you could take these if you're working with children, cut them apart, show them to children when nothing terrible is happening so that they can think through what are some solutions to these typical problems. And it's here in English and in Spanish. There's also a handout about challenges and solutions right here. So here are some challenges we face when working with or raising children, and tells you what to consider and the skills that are built by doing that. The next resource is problem solving in the real world. And it gives examples of language that we can use to help people with solving their problems and to help children with solving their problems. The next column has visuals. Here's the classroom edition. There's also a family edition on this Padlet. When children are thinking about what can we do next time, visuals are helpful. So here's a whole kit of potential solutions to problems. If you work with young children, and that's why you're in this session, I've seen people cut this kit apart, laminate it, and put it in a basket in the classroom or in a binder in the classroom so that we can all flip through the solutions and figure out which ones might work. So there it is here in English and Spanish. There's also larger images here for you. Right here, larger images of the same solutions. And the steps are down here for you again. Then I put a column with the Flip It strategy, which is another training. It's a different training. It talks a lot about the conversations we need to have with people around problem solving and challenging behavior. And it does talk about feelings first, and then remind people of the limits. Like, for example, saying, you threw the block. I think you're angry. Remember, we promised everyone would be safe. And then asking children questions, making inquiries to see if they can figure out how to solve their problems. And if they can't, we provide them with prompts. So it's basically the same thing. Flip It coordinates with other systems. And then we have family resources here that you or anybody else can use at home. Here's a handout that shows activities that families can do at home to help their children to learn about their emotions. There's also the We Can Be Problem Solvers book, the home edition. If you're around my age, you remember game shows with the home edition. This is the home edition of the problem solving book. And it has the same steps, but the images show problems that children typically have at home. So it's here in English and Spanish with the family solution kit and activities that can be done with children. Children first learn to regulate their emotions by regulating their bodies. And so this is an activity we can do with them where they learn, wait, I have control over my body. Ben, I don't know if you are only having trouble seeing my screen or if everyone is, but you can all chime in the chat and let me know if you're all having trouble seeing the screen. This handout also has books that families can use and a related episode of Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which really, frankly, is one of the best shows for young children. There's a column about gathering data about challenging behavior. Early educators document children's behavior, so there's information about that there. There's also teacher resources here because I often work with teachers and these Padlets are used pretty widely. You're welcome to look through them. And then the final column is Stay Connected. That's staying connected with me if you would like. I am the co-host of How Preschool Teachers Do It. I'm hoping you can see the screen because the logo of my podcast is here. How Preschool Teachers Do It is some free learning. Feel free to become one of our podcast peeps and listen to How Preschool Teachers Do It. We release new episodes every Monday morning of about 20 to 30 minutes so that people can listen on their commute. And we've been doing it for about 8 years. We're on YouTube starting March of 2020, but not until then. And I'm going to show you the QR code for this Padlet, and then I will share the link in the chat for those of you who prefer to grab it that way. Loads of really good resources for you. There's the QR code. I hope you can see it. And if not, I'm going to put the link in the chat in a second. I'm going to come out of the screen share. Okay, I am out of the screen share. Oh, people are saying I can see it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put the Padlet link in the chat. Hopefully that will come up. I just got an error message, something about the host. Can you all see that link in the chat?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. If you click on that, it's going to ask you for the good word or a word. Just put in my first name, uppercase C, lowercase I-N-D-Y. That's all you need to get into it. And then you can put it among your favorites and keep an eye to see if I add new resources. All right, folks, we have a few, regardless, in spite of all the technical difficulties in the beginning, we have about 4 minutes. So if you have anything, any statements or questions, I am happy to hear those or get those in the chat, however we need to do it.
That was great, Cindy. I really enjoyed it. I'm always a big I've always had like a lot of interest in the just psychology behind problem solving because I've always loved problem solving. Like I love puzzles. I love the idea of like let me, untangle this. But I know how much anxiety it gives people a lot of the times and how like that whole freeze or fight kind of thing comes into play. And I know it has so much to do with our childhood because I mean, I had said it in the chat, but my dad made everything a lesson and it drove me crazy. But my parents were very like, try to figure it out and then we'll help you. But like, they would need me to prove that I attempted to figure it out on my own. They were both working adults and didn't really probably it was probably a time constraint for them, like figure
Yeah,
it out and
probably.
just come to us. But it's instilled in me like kind of an I love a problem. Like it's nice to have it. Yeah, of course you get a little anxiety, but I think it stems a lot from how they were very figure it out and then we
Yeah.
can help you kind of thing.
It does stem from, my parents would say to us, I have 2 sisters, and they would say to us, figure it out when we were fighting amongst each other. But otherwise, they were very, here, do it this way. And that was true for a lot of children. And so when we became adults, we don't know how to teach it to children because it was never demonstrated for us and modeled for us. And I think that that's one of the biggest struggles in early childhood anyway, is to understand Sometimes we need to hand the control to the children in a way that they can do, and where we're guiding them and providing them with the support that makes them feel safe. You can't, when we just look at children, like you're saying, it drove me crazy, Jackie said, drove me crazy. Yeah, because we also need to be like, I'm right here if you're having trouble with it. It's the two-step thing.
I can't wait to use these resources with my two children. I have a
Enjoy.
2-year-old and a 5-year-old, so hopefully we can
Enjoy.
utilize some of this information from your Padlet.
I'm sure you can. Grab that book, Ben, read it at bedtime.
Will do for sure. All right, well, I think that closes us out. Thank you, Cindy, so much, and thank you
You're
to the
welcome.
audience for your participation in today's session. Please use the survey linked in the chat to nominate TLC presentations for conference awards and share your feedback on this presentation.
Bye. Thank you, folks.
Thank you so much.